Chapter 61. So, quite early the next morning, there they both are, about to go visit one of the local mounds with the possibly unstable Captain Shelby as their guide. The frost along the tent rigging bleached in the last of the moon, their breaths upon the air remaining white for longer than 'twould seem they ought. Mason and Dixon step out of the perimeter into the wild, now as entirely subject to the captain's notions of grace as any Romans lured by promises of forbidden knowledge in the care of an inscrutable druid. "Come along," cries the captain jovially. "We need to be there just at sunrise." "Folly," Mason mutters. "Aye," Dixon replies. "You'd have preferred the moonlight, I guess, and an owl or two." Down by the creek they fall in with the path Shelby means to follow. The North Mountain rears above them, soon to catch the first light at its crest. Trees fill with whistling, squadrons of cloud go rushing in the sky. The breeze has a cold edge, dead leaves are everywhere. Soon all odour of wood smoke has faded behind them. That of ripeness come and gone enfolds them. And then something else. "There's a new barrel mill in the neighbourhood. Smell it?" They are coming near the bank of a creek. Shelby, eyebrows wrinkling together, takes hold of his shot bag and begins to toss it lightly in his hand. He seems eager to begin firing at any target that may present itself. "Grist millers," he declares, "discover there is more money in grinding out cheap barrels for rifles for the savages. Philadelphia money. Here, up this way." Mist is gathered in the hollows, thick and cohering, blinding whilst carrying to each the breaths and mutterings of the others. Everywhere between these white episodes the clarity of the dawn slowly, piercingly emerges. "This river, another valley," the captain exhorts them, "and we are there. Over the crest and down to ford, and then follow the creek through a gap in the hills to another stream where, in the angle of confluence, its tip just catching the first rays of the sun, stands Captain Shelby's mound." "Eh?" cries Dixon. "What is a great cone?" "Reg'lar as Silbury Hill." Captain Shelby's head at an admiring angle. Mason, slow to enthusiasm, sniffs the air. "No fermented maize fumes about, but then 'tis still, so to speak, early in the day." "My sacred word," the Welshman, rolling his eyes heavenward, producing, however, an effect more of madness than of piety. "Come, boys, come!" They are boys. They approach the giant solid, alone upon its promontory, as light slowly envelops it, dyeing it a cold, crystalline rose. Mason's first question, though he refrains from asking it aloud, is, might it be under invisible guard? And how zealous are they? Shelby, watching his face, knows gleefully enough his apprehensions. How do the Indians hear about fancy spectators like us? Dixon asks. They laugh. They but appear a solemn people, worshipping laughter rather as a serious, indeed holy force in nature, never to be invoked idly. This mound is something they understand perfectly, that white people do not, and show no signs of ever doing so, is a source of deep amusement for them. Is there a way inside? There shouldn't be, but there is. The Welshman's eyes tighten. It was broken into years ago, perhaps by some larcenous fool who had it confused with a pyramid. His disappointment was the only good to come of it, for he found nothing, no ancient corpses, nor even copper bracelets or tobacco pipes, for Indians never built it. "Eh!" cries Dixon, who's been peering into the opening. "Do you see this? How these layers are set in? Mason, that device Mr. Franklin showed us, his Leyden jar. Remember all that fancy layering inside it?" "Yes," impatiently. "But those were gold leaf, silver foil, glass, philosophical materials." A quick glance toward Shelby. "Whilst these," having a squint, "seem but different kinds of refuse, dirt, ashes, crushed seashells, not likely to be an ancient Leyden battery, Dixon, if that's what you're thinking." "A marvel no one taught you this, Mr. Mason, for there is lengthy knowledge of such things, according to which alternating layers of different substances are ever a sign of the intention to accumulate force. Not necessarily electrical neither. Perhaps, Captain, these substances Mr. Mason so disrespects may yet be suited to forces more telluric in nature, more attuned, that is, to death and the slower phenomena." Mason is shaking his head, having no idea how to control ranting like this, genial though it be. He's long known that leadership is not his best quality. Captain Shelby is staring at them both with apprehension more than curiosity, for he has seen the deep woods and its mysteries quite derange more than one visitor from the sea coast and beyond. Deciding to place his faith in reason, "You'll note how the sunlight has been creeping down the cone, a progressive warming of the structure, the diameters of each infinitesimal ring at each moment being the crucial values. Did either of you bring a compass?" "Here's one." "Eh!" Dixon, regarding his needle, feels himself begin to drift somewhere else, off at an angle to the serial curve of his life. Mason peers over his shoulder. "Hum!" right into Dixon's ear. "Ugh!" leaping away. "Mason, don't do that!" He struggles to refocus, in fact, to remember where he is. The needle is swinging wildly and without pause, rocking about like a weather vane in a storm, Dixon pretending to gaze at it knowingly. Mason a squint. "Well, thank you for allowing us to witness your experience. Aye, very helpful indeed." Shelby would have preferred the slow chatter of three men in the early morning with naught more to discuss than the day ahead. This structure happens to be quite in the projected path of your line, he informs them. When at length your visto is arrived here, the mound will become active as an important staging house for whatever it may be, with an attempt at a chuckle, though it comes out too loud and imperfectly controlled. To quote Mr. Tox in his famous Pennsylvaniad, a force intensifier as 'tis styled, a geomantic engine in the wild, whose task is sending on what comes along, as brisk as air, and several times as strong. Welsh in origin, it goes without saying. How so? Welsh Indians? Oh, absolutely. Only a few days west and south of here. 'Twas in the Turkish spy but a few years since. The Cymri, Captain Shelby explains, having first come to Britain from far to the east, some say Babylon, some Nineveh, their fate ever to be westering, America but one of their dwelling places, the ocean nearly irrelevant. Hugh Crawford believes they are the Tuscaroras. Come along! He leads them uphill again, to what seems the ruin of a wall, encircling part of the hilltop, where he stoops and brushes away some dirt. Here, inscribed in a roughly dressed stone, they see a line of brief strokes, some pointing up, some down, some both ways. These are all over the British Isles. 'Tis a writing called Ockham, invented by Hu Gadan the Mighty, who led the first Cymric settlers into Britain. As ye'll note, 'tis useful for those who must move on quickly, yet do wish to scribble down something to commemorate their presence. What does it say? Well, as nearly as I can make out, astronomers beware, surveyors too. This means you. Of course, I haven't read any of this for centuries, yet 'tis indisputably Old Welsh. As you describe this line, opines the professor back at camp. Excuse me. The marker stones set at regular intervals. A cascaded array of units, each capable of producing a force. I do suspect we have the same structure as a laden battery, and need I add, of a torpedo, with the head aimed close by Newcastle, or the other way, were the cascade reversible, the emitted blast being as easily directed westward as east. Either direction. 'Twould be a pip of a weapon, even with your marker stones placed no further than Sidling Hill. Why fire at Sidling Hill? Dixon, all innocence. Not at the hill, chuckles Captain Shelby, at what's coming over the hill. Pontiac, the French. Too late for them. One day one of you'll risk a peep over the ridgeline, and then you'll see. More mountains, says Mason. Exactly, mountains such as these, which may be lived among the year round. Therein ever rocks the cradle of rebellion. Sooner or later, something up here will grow hungry or hopeless enough to want to descend to the plain, to stoop like hawks upon rich Chesapeake, the metropolis itself, If the black boys so easily had their way with the British regulars at Shippensburg, who knows what wonders are yet possible out here over the North Mountain. Yet removing trees to create a pair of perfectly straight edges is to invite Shah, as Captain Zhang, ever eager upon the topic of the line and its visible expression upon the landscape, with its star-dictated indifference to the true inner shape or dragon of the land, will be happy to indicate to them. They came from the sky. They prepared to emplace these webs of right lines upon the earth. Then, without explanation, they went away again. Their work is being continued by the Jesuits, inscribers of meridians, whether in blind obedience to some ancient coercion long expired, or in witting complicity with it, who can say? Captain Zhang can of course imagine Jesuits guilty of anything, including conspiring with extraterrestrial visitors to mark the living planet with certain signs, for motives of their own, motives they do not discuss, especially not with their Jesuit hirelings. Hearken, gentlemen, someone wants your visto, not your line, nor the boundary it defines. Those are but a pretext for the actual cleared straight track. In the domain of very slow undulations we are discussing here, wood is as much an element as air or water, living trees in particular producing a force that might interfere in too costly a way with whatever is to be sent up and down this line. Earth, withal, is a body, like our own, with its network of points disposed along its meridians. Much as our medicine in China has identified upon the human body a like set of lines invisible, upon which, bead-wise, are strung points, where the flow of qi may be beneficially strengthened by insertions of gold needles. So, this arrangement of oolite shafts, at least partly inserted into the earth, you see, it is suggestive. Do we want to hear this? Captain Shelby inquires plaintively. Hold. 'Twill be legal evidence of his insanity. Allow him to... Ah, yes, then, Captain, you were saying, and how fascinating, that you believe the planet Earth to be a living creature, Exactly as the creatures microscopic upon your skin believe you to be a planet. They may be arguing even now about whether or not you are a form of life. Each time you step into a tub, there comes upon them another universal flood with its animalcular Noah, and another re-inhabiting, another chain of generations, to them how timeless, till the next wash. Some reason that bottle isn't moving more briskly, Dixon wishes to know. Thank ye. Now, Mason, don't take the hump, but the captain's right. Right? Consider. We've an outer and an inner surface, haven't we? Which mathematically 'tis easy using fluxions to warp and smooth by small continuous changes into a toroid with openings at either end, leading to... Hold, cries Mason, an inner surface? Are you by chance seeking analogy between the human body and the planet Earth? The Earth has no inner surface, Dixon. Have you been to its end to see? Though I come from pretty far north, Stig puts in, yet there's a lot more north of even that, out of which now and then a sail will appear upon the horizon, a snow-craft approach, all the day long, and at evening at last put into our little village. Everyone crowds into the inn by the light of beer-fat candles to drink cloudberry flip and listen to the visitors' tales of a dark, great cavity up there, mirrored overhead as by a water sky, funnel-shaped, leading inside the earth to another world. Grant me patience, O Lord, Mason with a bleak expression, holding his head, when 'tis not the 11 days missing from the new style, or the Cock Lane ghost, yet abides the hollow earth as a proven lure and sanctuary to all that too lightly bestow their faith. Why? Snorts Dixon. Half of all the philosophers in Durham are hollow earthers. That accounts for Emerson, hisses Mason. Who was the other again? Lud Orfrey, glowers Dixon. Marvellous chap, and he ever spoke highly of thee. Dixon, pray you think. If Newton's figure is correct, if the density of the earth, on average, is between 5 and 6 times that of water, then the shell of this hollow earth of yours, be it hundreds of miles thick, would have to possess some quite impossibly high density to make up for the empty interior. At least, say, 12 times that of water, maybe more. Where is the evidence of this? Solid rock is but 2.5 times as dense as water. What more could be down there? Precisely what the Royal Society would wish to know. You have not, that is, mentioned this to, pausing to consider how not to give offence. Some believed me, some didn't. Some took me for a Jesuit agent angling for a northern expedition of some kind. Mr. Birch, bless him, immediately went off to make converts. Others asked questions that have to term more or less rude. My mining background and so forth. A Geordie descends into the earth just once, and right away everyone starts to get ideas. Dixon on now like a tree full of ravens with his hollow earth, an enthusiasm Mason judges too developed to be argued away without investing more time and patience than he possesses. Withal, he is too open himself to the seductions of melancholy and its own comfortless phantoms to call anything even as remotely hopeful as this into question. No more doubts for Mason just at the moment, thank you, considering how ever less serviceable to him, as his days spin onward, they are proving to be. China may once have been another planet, Captain Zhang is now speculating. Embedded into the earth through some very slow collision. Long ago, all populated with its language and customs, arriving from the east-northeast, aiming for the Pacific, overshoots, ploughs into Asia, pushes up the Himalaya range, comes to rest intact, which is how, until the first Christian travellers, it remains. Taking this courteously, if not perhaps seriously, Dixon replies, "Yet, from all we know from Newton onward, how could the mechanism of its approach have been other than swift and cataclysmic? Why, if within the last few miles of mutual approach, a repulsive force were to come into play between the Earth and the Chinese planet, acting counter to and thus slowing the collision. By analogy, of course, to Father Boskovich's theory of repulsion at very close distance among the primordial atoms of nature. Dixon shakes his head, as if to clear some passage within. This is Jesuit physics. Why are you telling us this? Why must you ever be subtle? Is this what Jesuits believe to be the origin of China? Zarpazo does. The Chinaman beams and nods, as if Dixon has just understood a joke. The night before they set out westward again, Captain Shelby, from behind a can of his own ale, brewed in the shed adjoining, his face composed, inquires of them, "Where is the third surveyor?" Mason, mistrustful, looks about as if this newcomer might be at hand. Dixon, understanding Shelby to be posing a riddle, is pulled between loyalty to Mason and despair at his slowness in these matters. "Pray, Captain," he feels obliged to play in, "what third surveyor is that? For we are but two." "Why," chuckles Shelby, "you are wise men from the east, and everyone knows they come in threes." Eh, that's a canny one for fair." Mason is less amused. The captain's discourse verges upon impiety. Furthermore, it seems a bad omen. Well, it's like the 13th guest, isn't it? Yet reported sightings of the supernumerary figure now begin to drift in. He is seen often in the company of an animal that most describe as a dog, though a few are not so sure, for its eyes glow as if all the creature's interior be a miniature of hell. The best time for a sighting seems to be at around sunset, just as the axemen are leaving off work and heading for the mess tent, the wind changing here in Pennsylvania, as between this world and the next, when one may catch him flitting across the visto behind the party. Back at the edge of visibility, black cloak, white wig, black hat, white stock, black breeches, and so forth. On foot, carrying a three-legged staff, with an instrument of some kind affixed. A rumour goes round that he is a surveyor of surveyors, independently hired by the line commissioners to keep an eye upon the first two. But where are the rest of his party? Other interpretations are less earthly. A figure that might arouse no comment in Philadelphia, in these parts 'tis esteemed a wonder, particularly as it shows no sign of having made the passage from there to here, not anyway upon the ground, nor through the forest. Presently in camp the phrase "resembles the old gentleman," spoken low, is being heard in reference to the third surveyor. It having been long understood out here, as Captain Shelby explains, that if one wishes to convey a certain item of spiritual property in consideration of a sum to be paid in advance, why such a contract may be arranged. The old gentleman is always interested, always buying. Even this long at the trade, as Shelby relates it, still resentful about his exile from the infinite, descended here among the harsh gradients of space, subject to the cruel flow of time, denied the future and the past, and thus his omniscience, whilst, as to drafting contracts, left slightly worse at it than the average Philadelphia lawyer. So when Brother Pritchard lives just over the ridge there, without the gentleman's noticing, decides to sneak in a force majeure clause that turns out to contain the phrase, acts of God, why, there's a legal crisis, the gentleman wishing to nullify the contract and get his money back, Pritchard seeking to keep the money and his soul as well. Very, very expensive lawyers, all from Philadelphia, are engaged by both parties. The journals and broadsiders get hold of the story, and quite excessive indeed grows the commentary that follows, in prose, verse, and caricature. The gentleman, having virtually invented public sensationalism, which is reckoned indeed upon his own torrid shores as entertainment, has no illusions about anyone's motives or the chances for great harm to his case. Yet naively, as others would say disingenuously, he clings to a belief in justice. Well, I don't know what you may have heard about what we call justice up here, his solicitor advises him, but don't set your hopes too high. Just enjoy your time in town, visit the shops, take in a show. Hell, of late, has been growing so congested that the gentleman is happy enough to come up to Pennsylvania. Even Philadelphia in the morning rush seems to him a prairie desolate, and who even knows how many years this lawsuit may take. To him, as to the deity, 'tis the blink of an eye. Damned souls? You think I even like damned souls? I go down to that route called processing. See them crowding in more and more every day. I grasp the situation, but don't enjoy it. Who could enjoy it? Upon consideration, I think you're better advised not to sue in any of our courts. You could get fried like a fritter, and counsel along with you. Don't you have any, machinery for resolving this out in the cosmos, wherever you come from? A legal system, Huss? Ha, ha, ha! What for? We're a rubbish tip, sir, for all your worst cases. Not that we get to pick or choose, though we do have to deal with the consequences for eternity, of course. Yet there I go, complaining again. Oh, and by the way, I'm anything but out in the cosmos. No, being but Earth's devil, local lad, working, in fact, for his omnipotence these days. Ha ha! Yes, once an equal and respected adversary, now but another contract employee. Ah, woe, and forget about luncheon. Does he even write? Once a century, maybe. If any of these damned souls could see the misery I get, maybe they wouldn't groan so much. Howbeit, my lord, my best advice is drop the case. Suppose we just go for the money. He can keep his soul. But posting this kind of debit isn't going to amuse my commissioners. Style it an investment. Say the huge sum was to ensure his corruption. You were developing a damned soul. Already used that one too much. They shut me down a few sessions back, alas. But you seem like a mortal of some ingenuity. Perhaps from time to time we could chat. Those would, of course, be billable hours. End of chapter.